All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I'm with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world, even when there's a deep freeze all across Canada and the United States. So thank you to the people that have joined us for joining us today. Right now, we've got one class joining live and a virtual school joining on YouTube Live. So for the virtual school guys, welcome, and please get ready to pass along questions in the chat bar there. But our live class is Miss Rasiga's grade 4 through 6s in Smooth Rock Falls, Ontario. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. Awesome. Now, the reason we're all here today is that we are joined live by Rachel Bell Irving, an educator at Ocean Wise's Vancouver Aquarium in Vancouver. And she's going to walk us through learning a little bit more about cephalopods, this amazing, incredible group of creatures, the most intelligent things without backbones in the entire world. And we're going to do that by doing a really curious thing. It might be our first ever, actually, with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, of doing a live squid dissection. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rachel. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jesse. So yes, hi, everybody. My name is Rachel. I'm here at the Vancouver Aquarium, which we are located in Stanley Park in Vancouver. So we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples, which means that we are right in the heart of a rainforest, both on land and underwater. The ocean is home to some of the biggest deserts, the densest forests, the most incredible mountain ranges, and so much of it has been unexplored that we're still discovering new creatures every single day. So today we're going to look at one of those really unique creatures that we're still discovering more animals in this family, and that is cephalopods. So cephalopods are a group that consists of octopus, squid, and cuttlefish. Now they are related to mollusks, which means they're related to snails and clams and all those animals that we usually know for having a really hard shell. But there are characteristics that tie all these animals together. And there's something that's happened in the evolutionary history that makes scientists wonder and curious as to how cephalopods came to be the way they are today. So we're going to take a look at the morphology of the animal. We've got a common squid here, which is a very staple food source for our animals here at the aquarium. I just ran down to our marine mammal kitchen to steal some of their food so that I could do the dissection this morning, and as well as very common animal in the food chain out on the west coast of British Columbia. And there's also quite a span around the world. So we're going to look at their morphology and how they're able to survive, because no matter where an animal is, that environment they have is always going to influence the body shape, the behavior, and how these animals survive. Environment always influences the characteristics of these animals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen for a moment. You're going to see this lovely face here for just a second. And then I'm going to switch over to my document camera. We should see our wonderful squid there. So I've got, again, 2 squid. These are usually juvenile squid. They come to us deceased, so don't worry about that. We do ship in many of them for our feed. And so we're a great opportunity for us to actually be able to dive in and look at the morphology of these animals. And as always with any kind of live dissection, we always want to make sure that we're showing respect to these animals, because it is an incredible opportunity for us to be able to look inside of nature and really dive deep. It's one of the best ways for us to really uncover what makes these animals so special. So before we do that, as every scientist does, we always start with observations. We start by looking at the outside of the body, drawing some ideas and maybe some guesses as to why these animals look the way they do, and sort of trying to gather what we can before we even start with a dissection. Now, cephalopods, the octopus, squid, and cuttlefish, one of the things that make them most famous, of course, is camouflage. This ability to change the color of their skin, generally to hide in with their surroundings. And cuttlefish are exceptional at this. They're one of the best that we have. And so squid are a little lesser known, but they can still change some of their colors. They do this using chromatophores right in the skin of the animal. And they're kind of like water balloons. If you imagine having a water balloon in your hands and squeezing it right in the middle, and you'll see how it kind of bulbs out up top. That's essentially how those chromatophores work. They're able to squeeze and contract, and when they do, the color comes forward. So what I'm going to try and do is activate some of that activity. And what we simply can do is just rub. So take a look kind of how it looks right now. Some basic observations, the colors, the density of the spots. And if we give it a good rub, hopefully we'll start to see some changes. So already I can see that this is getting much darker, much more dense. There's a lot More of those pigment cells have been activated, which is great. And we've even got some of the pink coming through, which is really cool. So that is how those chromatophores work. They have to be activated in some way. And that means so when the animal is alive, they've got those muscles to do the contractions and change it, which is really cool. So great camouflage ability. And we also see just by looking at it that they've got these really cool kind of fins. They've actually got a very much a torpedo shape, an arrow shape, a rocket shape. And when we see body shape, that can really tell us a lot about how the animal lives, particularly how it hunts or how it swims. So when we see this long, narrow body like that, we can kind of assume that it's probably a fast swimmer of some kind. It's specifically designed to be quick and speedy through the water. And if we move down the body as well, we actually will find something that helps them do that. There is a very cool tube that's going to be sticking out. I'm just going to try and find it. There it is. It's on the underside. There's this very cool tube in here that is called a siphon. So I'm actually just sticking sticking my tweezers up it just a little bit so you can see where that's located. And the siphon is good for a number of different reasons. One, it's that projectile jet propulsion that they can do. So they can squeeze water out very quickly and to shoot their body very much like a bow and arrow to get away incredibly quickly if they need to. But it also might be good for water transfusion as well as what also makes them famous being the ink. But we'll get back to the ink in a moment later. And moving down the body, we know they're now fast swimmers, but how do they interact with their environment? If we think about humans, it's always great to compare to people. We have our hands, we have our opposable thumbs, which are great fingers. We're able to use these to navigate around our environment. But if we look at an animal like a dog, for example, or a shark, for example, they don't have those hands to manipulate with. So they have to use their mouths. They have to use what's available to them. So you'll often see dogs like chewing on their toys and testing things out. We see this in babies with human babies too, not really understanding how to use their hands yet. They use their mouths. Now squid, what do they use? Well, we have those awesome appendages down at the bottom called both. This is the kind of the tricky part is many people think that octopus, for example, have 8 tentacles. That is an urban myth. You can prove all of your friends wrong right now. They only have 8 arms. This is the big difference. There is a difference between arms and tentacles, and you see that difference in the squid. We've got 2 really, really long appendages here, and these 2 are what the tentacles are called. They've got nice 2 long tentacles, and then they have 8 arms. The difference being that with an arm, and I can pull this open a little bit and you'll see, we've got suction cups all the way down the length of the arm. There we go. So there's those bumps all the way down the length of the arm, and that's what makes them an arm. When you've got tentacles, the suckers, sorry, when you've got the suckers all the way down the length of the arm, that's what makes it an arm. But when you're looking at a tentacle, it's very, very, very smooth up until the end. And then at the very end, that is where we find the suckers. So kind of quite similar to hands in a sense, where we've got our skinny arm and then fingers at the end. Tentacles work very similarly. So when you're looking at an octopus, if you think about how an octopus is, they've got 8 appendages, all with suckers, all the way down the length of their body. And so that makes them arms. Octopus have 8 arms. They have no tentacles. Squid, on the other hand, have 2 tentacles, nice and skinny with the suckers at the end. And they also have 8 arms with the long suckers. And when we peel back those arms and we take a look, we see a black blob inside. That is the mouth. That is the beak. I am going to try and pull it out. So bear with me for a moment while my hands are in the shot. And we're going to try and get at our beak here. The beak is also one of those defining characteristics of cephalopods. They all have the beak. It does look quite similar to the parrot beak in a way. There we go. And if I pull it out, come on. Okay, we got one half of it. Excellent. We've got our, our beak there. You can see one half of the beak. Excellent, nice and sharp. And then the second half. Whoop. Obviously very well protected. There we go. Second half. Excellent. So there we go. We've got 2 halves of our beak there. And that is very helpful for the octopus and squid to help break down the food that they're going to be eating. We see a lot of these cephalopods eating things like crustaceans, so crabs, shrimp, anything they can really get a hold of, maybe even fish from time to time. They'll use the arms and the tentacles to grab a hold of everything, very, very strong animals, and then they're able to bring it into towards their body and eat it using that beak and break apart the harder material with the beak. Some species, more in tropical areas, you will see poisonous or venomous, sorry. So if they bite you, you might actually be able to get sick. Mostly those are tropical species. In BC, we don't have to worry about that so much, but keep in mind anything with a mouth can bite. So if you get grabbed by an octopus, I do recommend trying to pull yourself away before you get in too close. Now, with that being said, we've looked at the external body, how they eat, how they might hide from predators. And the next great thing to do, of course, is to kind of dive in and see, well, how do they function on the inside? And one of the big questions we get with a lot of invertebrates is simply how do they keep their shape? Because they are invertebrates, meaning they have no bones. So if you were to touch the back of your neck and you feel that there's bumps back there, those are the vertebrae of your spine, and that's what makes you a vertebrate. You are a bony animal, you have the spine. Invertebrates are animals with no backbone. They have no spine and no bones. Some of them use different methods in order to make sure that they don't just fold in on themselves. So crabs have shells, for example. Other animals have endoskeletons where they have kind of like a shell on the inside. And since these guys are related to mollusks, we think that there must have been a shell at some point in their evolutionary history. They had to have some kind of shell. It's what makes them related to mollusks. But the question is then, where did the shell go? Because over time, it's obviously reduced or lost that shell entirely. And the reason is, where the question is why. It's something that scientists are still trying to understand. But we do see evidence of a shell when we start getting just underneath the skin. And along this wonderful squid, we've got actually this sharp pointy thing here. And I'm gonna try and pull it out so we can see. Oh, there we go, awesome. So here comes what we call the pen. And the pen acts very similarly to your backbone, where it's providing a nice structure to the squid. Here, there we go, excellent. Now it's a bit odd looking. It is very clear. It feels and looks a lot like plastic, but it is made of calcium carbonate, which is the same thing as chalk. It's also the same thing that shells from snails and clams are made out of too. So because this is the same kind of chemical component and because it's made of the similar materials, that's how we have that sort of conclusion that they must have been related somehow, as well as a couple other characteristics. So this is the only evidence we really have left that squids had shells at some point. And I'll leave it up to you to wonder why it might have been more beneficial for a squid to lose their shell over time. I'll leave that for you to wonder. And now that we've removed the backbone, the squid has lost a lot of its structure. It's very easy to bend and to move around. And so it loses that ability to be a very fast swimmer, because now if they tried their jet propulsion, they would just and that wouldn't be very effective. So that's one of those ways that we look at with invertebrates, is how are they able to survive and keep their structure. And now we're gonna open it up and take a look at the inside. So I'm gonna flip our squid over so that we can get a nice look at the underside. And we're gonna do a cut. Now, if you ever do a dissection, something to keep in mind with your scissors is to keep your scissors angled up as best you can, because if we angle it down and we stab our squid, then we're gonna ruin all of the cool organs that are on the inside. So I like to try and keep my scissors pointed up and avoid cutting into anything like that. If we're careless with our squid or with any of our dissection specimens, then we lose the opportunity to see all the amazing stuff that's inside. Now, if you ever get a picture of a squid diagram, it looks a little bit different than this. When you get things in real life, it is a lot more challenging to kind of discern what you're looking at. And this is why I always want to mention how important arts is for science, because art gives us the ability to communicate with people. So if people see this picture, they don't really know what they're looking at. But if you have someone who's able to draw or maybe digitally design another model of a squid, a sketch, a diagram of a squid, that is really effective for everybody to then learn what's inside a squid. So art is incredibly important to science to help us communicate and make sure that everybody helps to be connected to the ocean. So now that we're inside of our squid, we've already looked at how they eat, how they protect themselves. Another very important thing for any animal is how do they reproduce? How do they keep going on into the next generations. And generally speaking, the bigger something is, the more important it is. Squid, for example, have very large eyes, so their eyesight is probably very important. And they also have very large gonads. And these are the reproductive organs. So this is how we try to identify if it's a male or a female. We're looking at this whole giant white squishy organ up here. If we had a female squid, it would look very bumpy. It would look more translucent, kind of clear-ish, because those would be the eggs. In a male, we're looking for something that's really white and milky, and that's holding the sperm. So in this case, I would surmise that this squid is probably a male. It looks like we've got our sperm sacs, as well as part of the digestive stomach. And we come down to this sort of yellow blob. Yellow blob, there's actually 3 of them. There's another one hidden underneath. And I believe there's another one hidden underneath as well. Those 3 yellow blobs are the hearts. Very effective for a squid, octopus, and cuttlefish. They all have 3 hearts. Another thing that kind of makes them a family and makes them related to each other is the 3 hearts. And again, we kind of are curious as to why would you bother having 3 hearts? Humans have 1 heart. 1 heart works pretty well for us. It's a very, very large heart, and it takes up a decent amount of space in our chest cavity. Now, squid, if we look at our squid, I'm going to zoom out and we'll see our full body here. There's not a lot of space in our squid for a big heart like humans, is there? It's quite small. There's not a lot of space. If we had 1 big heart, for example, to pump blood to the gills, to the rest of the body, to everywhere, it would take up a lot of space. And so maybe it was more beneficial over the years for squid to actually diverge into having 3 hearts that are smaller, that they can place around the body a little bit easier. And then each heart has a job to do, which is great. It makes sure that the blood is actually getting where it needs to go. So 2 of the hearts are dedicated to the gills, and then the rest of the heart, or the other heart, is dedicated to the rest of the body. And they do have gills that look very different from fish that we're usually used to. Here are the gills. They're the 2 long, feathery sort of appendages there. There we go. The 2 gills, just like any animal that is living in the water that's not a mammal, they have to have gills in order to pull oxygen from the water. So that's really important. And you can see they're quite cool. They've got the little feathery look in there, and it's nice and moist to make sure that they stay wet. And then we've got one of the most famous parts of the squid, the thing that stands out the best, with that wonderful ink sac. And so this ink sac looks quite empty, but we'll see if we can cut it out and take a look. Oh, there he goes. Normally it's best to try and remove it so that it doesn't pop inside the body. Otherwise the ink, it can get everywhere. Now the thing that's cool about the ink is it's not quite ink like a pen. You definitely can write with it, which I have seen many people make smiley faces out of. There we go. So you can use the ink to write with. It's a little bit stronger than a pen ink, because if you could try it yourself, if you take a pen, if you disassemble a pen and you put that ink into the water and watch what happens to it, because that ink, it's very easy to dissipate and to kind of dissolve quickly. And that's not going to stop a predator. If you want a smoke screen to throw at a predator to make sure you can run away, you need something that's not going to just dissolve in the water really quickly. So what we find with squid ink is that it's actually got this kind of mucus ability. So when it does get released in the water, it can coagulate, it can get stronger and sticky. And it actually then can either blind the predator or clog in its gills or help to create an actual smoke screen of sorts to protect the squid, so they have the opportunity to run away. Now, there is one other cool thing that I do want to mention, because I think it's one of those very unique abilities of squid. When we get to the heart, and we mentioned how there is limited space within the squid in order to be fast, so they have to be really kind of smart over time. If they've evolved, they've become very creative in terms of where my body organs have to go. And we know that squid are intelligent. We've seen this in many cases, particularly with octopus, doing trials to see if they can open jars and problem solve. And we see that they do have to have some kind of high functioning capabilities. So their brain has to be somewhere. Now, I'm going to just pause for a couple seconds and try to think about where you think the brain might be. Because we've looked at our body cavity, we've got our stomach, our gonads, we've got our ink sac. We've got our beak. Just thinking for a moment where you think the brain might be. We've got a guess or two. I'm going to see if I can pull it out. What's really cool about octopus and squid and cuttlefish is that over time, they've developed a donut-shaped brain. A donut-shaped brain that exists. There we go. Oh, there it is. Excellent. Boom. This, ladies and gentlemen, down here is the brain. This wonderful sack that I just pulled out of the mouth. So octopus and squid and cuttlefish have a donut-shaped brain that sits just above the beak. And so what happens with the food is that their esophagus, their throat, just like you have, actually travels through the hole in the donut to go up to the rest of the body. So you can see as I'm pulling it out, there's that kind of gooey string coming out along with it. That's the esophagus. That would lead to the stomach. So you've got a donut-shaped brain, one of the really, really cool example of space maximization, having a donut-shaped brain so that you have enough room in the body cavity for your important organs like your stomach, your gonads, and everything else. And that's why they do have this sort of bulbous-shaped head to allow for that nice large brain that is great at problem solving. So with the squid and cuttlefish and octopus, they serve a very important function in the food chain. They're right in the middle where they do eat a lot of those smaller animals, but they also are eaten by a lot of bigger animals. And so they're a great way for us to understand, because if anything were to happen to animals like this in the food chain, it's going to have a massive impact on the rest of the entire balance. And by enabling us to understand better, we're then able to help either protect these species or also make guesses how other species might be affected. It's like a gateway into the entire ocean ecosystem. And the ocean covers 71% of the planet, and we've only explored 5% of that. Just 5%. We know more about space than we do about our own oceans. So opportunities like doing dissections or even just taking a walk near a water body near you, whether that's a river, a stream, a pond, a lake, an ocean, just taking a walk around your local waterways and seeing how you are connected is a great first step to better understanding how the ocean helps us and how we're connected. Because we do see impacts daily about how humans are able to affect the life in the ocean. And so the better that we can understand something, the better we're able to overcome many of the problems that we see facing it. So that is an overall rundown of the inside of the squid. But we have lots of time for questions. So I'd love to know if you have any questions about squid, cuttlefish, octopus, all those kind of things as well.
Very cool. That was amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much. All right. So what we'll do is Miss Wafer's class will come to you guys every second thing. If I know your students are going to type in questions to you, which is great. But we'll start with Miss Rosika's class. If you guys have a question to kick us off, go right ahead.
Yeah, we do it just a second.
Yeah, take your time.
What is a cuttlefish?
Oh, that's a good question. What is a cuttlefish? So a cuttlefish, I'm just trying to see if I have a cuttlefish here. I don't believe I, oh, I do. Hold on one second. So I don't have a cuttlefish. I have something that is quite similar in body shape. So a cuttlefish is basically like a squid, but if you were to shorten it and fatten it. So an octopus is kind of like a blob with lots of arms. A squid is that arrow. And a cuttlefish is much more like a rectangular shape. See if I can find a picture of a cuttlefish. But they still do have those 8 arms. They do have the very large eyes that makes them famous for the species. And so that's how we know that they're related to them as well, because they still have those same characteristics in tune with the octopus and the squid. So let's see if I have a picture. Oh, there we go. Okay. One moment. Let's see. Because they are very cool. They are one of the masters of camouflage out of all the animals, because they can actually change some of their texture as well. So these are some cuttlefish. Master of disguise. This is a very good one. So you can see they've kind of got that rectangular body. They still have the fin, just like the squid did as well, but it goes all around the body. And then they've got the 8 arms too. So that is a cuttlefish.
Super cool. All right, let's head to Miss Wafer. If you have a question for one of your students, go right ahead.
We do. Rachel, thank you so much. Our students are all around the world, so if I'm looking this direction, it's because I'm in a virtual classroom with them. And so we have a couple of questions. The first one is from Larissa. She's in Washington State. She's in 7th grade, and she's wondering about how many suckers are on each tentacle of the squid or the octopus. I can't remember which one is which and which one has the suckers and which one doesn't.
That's a great question. Thank you, Larissa, for your question as well. The suckers will depend on the size and the species of the animal. So there can be a whole lot of them. It's very hard to sit down and actually count every individual one. Our giant Pacific octopus, which is local to West Coast, so in Washington, you would, if it's Washington State, you said? Ah, perfect. So yeah, West Coast, you'll definitely have them in Washington, all the way to Oregon and California. They can be up to 20 feet long, so reaching one end of the room to the other. Their suckers on a full grown is about that big, kind of like a coffee mug, when you think about that. So they can be incredibly big, and in terms of numbers, hundreds, depending on the size of the octopus or squid.
Very cool. I urge the classes too to look up what a colossal squid or a giant squid suckers look like, because they are super freaky. Like, that is some freaky stuff. All right, let's head back to Mr. Sega's class. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Can the squids ink more than one?
Can a squid,
Can a squid use its ink more than once, Rachel?
Ink, yes, it can. So it does take a while for it to, sorry, there's a lot of feedback. It takes a while for them to like reproduce their ink. So they do have to make it themselves in their body, which can take a lot of energy and can take time. So it really is that last resort defense. They're only going to use it if they absolutely have to, but they can produce more ink eventually.
Nice. All right, let's head back to Ms. Waver.
Okay, so Kitoko is in 6th grade. She's actually in Malaysia, and she's wondering, as far as reproduction goes, how many children do a pair of squids produce?
Ooh, I love that question. Yes, and that's a really big component of any animal's lifestyle is what method of reproduction they use. So with cephalopods, they will lay like hundreds of eggs, and they're about the size of a grain of rice, very, very tiny. And then they will leave those, or the female usually guards them until they hatch. And of those millions of eggs that are laid, usually only a very small percentage of them actually survive. So that's one method that many animals use. It's have a ton of eggs and hope that one or two survive. And that's kind of how the investment works for them.
Okay. Love having a question from Malaysia, by the way. That's awesome. Cool. All right, let's back to Mr. Sega's class. We're ripping through these guys. Way to go.
Where exactly do you get these squids from?
Great question. Where do we get the squids from? So we have a supplier that's local that ships them to us, essentially. So just like you might order apples or bananas, we order squid. And they come frozen. So they are farmed, and then they're shipped to us frozen.
Nice. All right, Miss Waver again.
Okay, so Della is asking, and she hasn't let me know where she's at or her grade level, but she's asking like the range of weight. Oh, she's in Pennsylvania and she's in 5th grade. So what's the range? I mean, you said they're the large ones, but as far as weight goes, those little ones that you have, how much do they weigh? And then the difference between that and the colossal size squids.
So the physical weight of them, like you said, will vary between the sizes. The little ones I have a couple kilograms at best. The larger ones can weigh a couple hundred kilograms, pounds. They can be very heavy because they are incredibly muscular. So even though they rely a lot on water to kind of give them their size and shape, they do have a ton of muscle, and that will definitely weigh you down. And they are still very strong even out of water. So yeah, definitely a hassle to handle outside of water if you're not careful.
Just to clarify too, because I know you don't have that information right in front of you, Rachel, if you look it up online, so colossal giant squid get up to 1,000 pounds. That's like the biggest ones ever, but several hundred pounds, and something like 40 to 50 feet long is what we recorded. So they're huge animals. Very cool. All right, Mr. Sega, let's come back to you.
How long can squids live?
Oh, I'm really glad you asked that, because this is one of the most surprising facts about a lot of these animals is the longest living octopus is 5 years old. Squid follow a very similar suit. So they really have very short lifespans for something that is so complex.
Yeah, very neat. And so big, too, like the fact that we can have animals that are, again, so intelligent, so large, and have such a short lifespan. It's when we talk with Ripley's Aquarium, too, that's something that gets brought up a lot with cephalopods. It's really neat. I'm glad that was asked.
And a big part of that is because when they do reproduce, they are terminal spawners. So that means that after the females lay her eggs, she guards them for a while and doesn't eat, doesn't protect herself until the eggs hatch, and both her and the male will die. So once the male's given the female his sperm, he will go off and die. Once her eggs are hatched, she will die, and they don't reproduce a second time.
Thanks, Rachel. Very cool. All right, Miss Waver. You know what? Let's do Miss Waver's class and then one more from each class, and then we'll wrap it up there. But this is great.
Sounds good. So Larissa's following up again. She's the student from Washington State. And she wanted to know if there, like sharks have different types. So we're saying that, squids are small and squids are huge. Is that all the same type of squid, or are there different types of squids like there are different types of sharks?
I like that you compared it to sharks. There are lots of different types of squid. Species is what we call them. So this is a common squid when the colossal squid is a different species. Giant Pacific octopus is one species. The blue ring octopus, which is like tiny little octopus in tropical areas, is a different type of species. So there's many, many different species. I believe the most recent cephalopod discovery was the Dumbo squid, which is found in very, very, very couple 100,000 meters down. So yes, lots of different species that they come in.
I'm going to say again, I urge the classes to look that up because it's such a cool animal. So just when we're done this hangout, just go and look up all these cool creatures, but they're some of the most amazingly beautiful and interesting things in the whole ocean. All right, let's go to Mr. Siga one last time.
How long can a squid go without eating?
How long can a squid go without eating? I've never had that question before. Thank you so much. That really depends on what they ate last. I don't know the specific answer to that. I don't know if that's been tested either. So I encourage you to look that one up as well. We generally feed our squid only a couple times a week, but we're checking on them daily. So in theory, any animal could go a week, maybe 2 weeks without food, but I don't know the specific results of that. Cool.
Good.
Question.
Listen, great to have questions where the answer isn't ready. So guys, do research, look it up, and go from there. All right. We'll wrap up with one last question from Ms. Wafer.
Okay, great. Grace from Maryland is asking, you may have answered this, but what is specifically the designation then, or the name of the biggest squid that there is? And I think you may have answered it, but I want to make sure. So,
colossal, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, but colossal squid, I believe, is the biggest. Because there's colossal and then there's giant squid.
There's colossal and a giant. They're both huge. One is longer than the other. One's heavier than the other. So I don't know which is which right now offhand. I'd have to look that up.
So it depends on what you define as biggest, because that could, it's very important to define your parameters, because, yeah, there could be a couple different answers to that one. But those are the two largest overall. I
like how he derailed us into giant squid from little squids so easily, because the bigger the animal, the cool. Yeah. Rachel, this was great. So before we wrap up, I just want to give you a chance. Is there anything else you want to tell classes about dissections they could run their own, studying nature in general, about the work you do at the aquarium? One last wrap-up piece.
I think it's great that we kind of touched on colossal and giant squid, because these are animals that are very difficult to study in the ocean, and there's many animals that are very difficult to study in the ocean. So when we have the chance to do a dissection with common squid, we can use all of the inferences we discover and the questions that we develop to then apply to those other animals of similar species. So being curious is one of the best tools you can have in your brain to wonder and to go out and explore further. So I really encourage you to go and outside and go look at your local waterway, because water's all connected, those nutrients are all connected, and our impact on that is all connected. So go out and explore your own place and see what kind of questions you come up with that you can then explore further.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for that. As we always do, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. So Mr. Siga's group, if you guys could join me, boys and girls, in saying a big thank you to Rachel for joining us today.
Thank you.
Awesome. We look forward to having all the classes back soon. Miss Wafer, thanks for bringing in classes from all over the world.
Yes,
and Rachel, we look forward to having you back